Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground is brought to you by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Common Ground is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota. Hi, and welcome to Common Ground. I'm your host, Ashley Hall. On this week's episode of Common Ground, Russell Sharon captures the essence of his community by painting 100 portraits of local people in the Randall Little Falls area. Plus, we take a walk through the streets of Wadena to see the many murals livening up the downtown area.
About 8 months ago, the Great River Arts Center in Little Falls called me and they wanted me to do a show of my paintings. And I have been painting abstract paintings, large abstract paintings, mostly for galleries on the East Coast and in Florida. And I had shown some in Little Falls before, some of my work, but I thought that what would really be interesting here in this community would be to do something more local. And so I suggested that I do 100 portraits of local people. And they thought that would be a good idea. It helps to energize the gallery and gets a lot of people interested. So I wanted to get a wide spectrum of the community, the farmers, doctors, dentists, artists, police, criminals, students, old, young, the works. And so I'm well on my way. You can see what I do, I take pictures. I don't work from people's setting because I would never get anything done that way because it's so hard to get someone setting for a few hours and have them set very still and have them here in the middle of the night when I usually paint. So I take pictures and put them up on my screen, crop them, change them around a little bit, put them up on my screen, and then do a sketch. So I get the general composition down very quickly because it's a face with some background and a face of with a certain likeness. What I like to do, some of the paintings are, the background is very simple. Like this one is my mother, Sharon, and my niece, her granddaughter, Cassidy Hintz. And that's sort of, I didn't want any energy in that other than that very calm, sort of mysterious look they have going there. Others, I put a lot of, I mix the paint right on the mahogany panel and it's all full of paint and I edit it out, but on some of them I like to keep a little bit of that color and energy going on. And yeah, they're all local. My nephew, this is someone who works for me, constructing metal sculptures, high school friend of mine, grocery store owner, son of a very good friend of mine. So every picture has a story. I want to get a story with each one. It's people who I run into pretty much at random. And I have my camera with me, so if almost everybody is willing to be in the show, and I always guarantee them that they're not going to like their portrait, but that it's going to be a very good painting. In a few years they will like it, but no, nobody ever likes they look at it as their likeness rather than as a painting. I draw it onto the mahogany panel, a very simple line drawing, and then I work from the line drawing. I have a English friend here, Hebe Joy, who I think is so beautiful. She spends a lot of time here. And she, I don't know, I think she looks like the Mona Lisa. But I want to get her this very pale, fair skin along with the reddish hair and her blue eyes. Those are very important parts of her character. I like to use different tools when I'm painting. Now, I have these paint pens, but I also use palette knife. I use a stick sometimes and paint brushes. But to get her hair, which is really frizzy, and I draw it by putting together a few of these pencils together, and I know that it's going to be really messy. And then I will go over this, but this will give some nice color underneath. It always sort of peeks through. I like the paintings to have some texture, so when you feel them, they might be a little bit rough, so people are tempted to touch them. I like that. It's good to be sort of sloppy, because if I'm not sloppy, I can't find where I'm going. I was always interested in art. My earliest memories are memories of creating and coloring and scribbling. And when I turned 18, I wanted to get out of here as fast as I could. So I went to school in Mexico and studied art and archaeology and anthropology in Mexico City. And I love that. Then I came back to Minnesota for a little while and then moved to Boston, studied with some people at MIT at the Advanced Visual Studies department. I went to New York. I moved to New York in 1976, and within 4 years I had a show at a nice gallery downtown, and I've been showing in New York almost every year since, which is a real godsend, because that is where the art buyers go. When you're doing a portrait, you know what you're after. You're after a likeness, and then you can play around with it a little bit. But when you do an abstract painting, you have to find it and recognize when you have it, and it can be really frustrating. But then when you get it, it's very rewarding. You see, this is her sort of milky white. Now, I go over this. This will be gone over a number of times. I'm using acrylic paint, which is something that I don't normally do. You have to find the line, and I have to, you know, that's when it comes in handy to have a picture, because she has this line going down, you know, that I've totally wiped out, like this line. And this up here is a little bit darker. I made it look sort of bruised. That's why you have to go over it, because this color is sort of an ugly color. With the acrylic, it's fairly forgiving. This one is this far done, which is a sketch. And so I leave this, I put this aside until it dries, and then rework it, you know, pull it out, clean it up, add details. But this is the underneath, so now I know where it's going and what I can do with it. First, I had to make, the first decision that I make is like putting the seed in the ground. And the first decision was to use those 4 colored paint tubes with the hair. And so that determined, you know, once you get the hair in, then you have to follow. I always follow whatever is there, try to see what is there and then work with it. Sometimes it doesn't work and I have to start from scratch, but this is going to work. I will redo the eyes, redo the skin. The hair is almost there. The background might be white or might leave it black. I always start with the black. In the background too, sometimes I like to have it reflect the energy of the person. The character comes out, you know, especially if I know the people, and I think even if I don't know the people, if I get a good, I usually take 15 pictures and work from them, so I don't have only, I'm not working from just one picture. You know, they probably take a total of a couple hours, something like that. But then they sit for a while, and then I look at them, and maybe they're not done, so I have to go over them. Usually that's what happens. So I will do something, I'll sketch it in, let it dry, and that's the first step. Then I do the next step, which is editing out what doesn't belong there, and redefining the shapes a little bit so they won't be so confusing. Like her neck, that whole thing there is very confusing, so I will change that and pretty much rework the whole thing and build up more paint. Let it dry again and then do the final touch-ups. So usually it takes, you know, three dries. You paint 3 times and then dry it 3 times, and then you hope that it's done. If it isn't, you just keep working. I started this project a year ago, and it's not something I've ever done before, but it's something that I will do again. I had never done, well, I've done a lot of drawings and some portraits, but that's not what I do. I do other things, other paintings. But something that I found very fascinating, and I was wondering about it when I started, when you do not 1 or 5 or 6 of something, but you do 100 of pretty much the same, you know, a face with 2 eyes, nose and mouth, and the same scale, it evolves and it changes as you go along. Every painting, you know, something is new, or there's something that's incorporated from the past that's new, and you pick up new things. Everyone here knows other people in this group. Some of them know all of everybody here. It's tricky sometimes to know when something is finished, and but it's important to know when it's finished, because if you don't, you go on forever, right? When I stand back and look at these, I can't really believe that I did so many in such a short time, because I always feel like I'm a little slothful and I never get anything done. But really, I'm a workaholic, so I feel like I always need to do more. But when I stand back and look at this work, I think I did it quite a bit in the last year.
Hi, I'm David Everett. This is Chuck Richards, and this is where the Alley Arts Institute project all began. I came out of this building one evening, and one of my employees stopped me and turned around and said, "Look how ugly your building is." And that led to a conversation that we could have a mural on this wall, and that wall, and that wall, and that wall. Well, that led to a brainstorming session, and we decided to organize a nonprofit called the Alley Arts Institute, and we decided that we would create the history of Minnesota of 1,000 years and fill the alleys of Wadena. I asked an artist by the name of Laura Fonlander from Shakopee to paint the story of mining in Minnesota. And so up here in the top right, you can see we got the deep pit mines that went as much as 2,000 feet down. And while that mining was going on, there were 7 guys called the Merritt brothers that were busy looking for iron in other places, and then one day their wagon broke and the wheel scarred the earth, and they picked up this rust-colored soil and had it tested, and by accident they found the Mesabi Iron Range, which was 64% iron. On this building here, which happens to be the first building we worked on with art, I asked a local artist to create what she imagined Minnesota to look like 1,000 years ago before man began changing it. And so we have all of the seasons of Minnesota life with all of the abundant wildlife. And part of what makes these murals so much fun is that there are many places on here when you look at them carefully that you can see that little children did the painting. Because the 2 artists that did these had several children from about age 6 through age 9 work with them on creating that art. On these 2 buildings, we have the only art that was actually painted directly on the building. All of the rest of the art has been created on a cement board and attached to the buildings so that it would be much easier to repair them. So we had to learn that as we did things. The mural on the right is a conversion of a blacksmith shop that was actually operated by the great-grandfather of that property owner over in Bertha. And that building has been associated with the leather industry for over 100 years. Next to it is a picture of a Norwegian family of immigrants that the relatives still live in this area. The Alley Arts project took 4.5 years, and early in that project I asked Chuck if he would paint the collage of cultures on this wall, and I asked him how much of the wall he would do, and his answer was, well, I'll do the whole thing. And so he did.
This took me 1 week shy of 2 years, and I worked from almost every day on it, 3 to 4 hours and even more sometimes. The mural's 144 feet long and 12 feet high, and on it is over 680 people, 125 different flags, plus the modes of transportation that brought these people to the state of Minnesota. We have a lot of Native Americans, Norwegians, Swedes, Poles, Germans, Finns, just to start, you know, and now we have quite a number of people have come to Minnesota. The Somalians, the Hmong, and they're up on here. And I also put the ethnic costumes that they, not some clothes actually, that they wore in the countries they came from.
Chuck's got a slightly twisted sense of humor. And so if you look carefully in this middle piece up here, you'll see that the modes of transportation is, you know, these people are coming into Minnesota, and there's a welcome sign, and right next to the welcome to Minnesota is the road under repair sign. So
that was just my little way of having at it. People started contributing to me. I had people come to me and they said, well, you know, my family's been here a long time. Would you put them up, you know? And I did, and it ended up we have the people coming from different states that I hear about. They come here and get their picture took with their relatives. That's cool. I like that.
This mural is called Minnesota Music, and it starts with native flutists, drummers, the early settlers with the fiddlers and the harmonica, to our own bandstand, which is right here in the park, and on through various stages of music until we get to a modern rock and roll band. This is the only mosaic in our collection, and it was created by Laura Moe, the art instructor from Perham High School, and 120 high school kids. And all of the pieces in here come from plates that come from antique stores in Minnesota. So we have old merchandise here, and each one of these panels, we had to cut them in half so they were only 4 foot by 4 foot, because by the time you put the mortar and the plates and the panels on there, each one of them weighed over 100 pounds.
When Ramsey was in Washington, he was talking with Lincoln, and the war is just starting, and he volunteered the Minnesota troops, who were the first ones to be volunteered for the Civil War from the North. And what I've done here is I took There were 15 different engagements at the first battle of Bull Run. And I took 5 of them and I combined them together to show this battle. And what you're seeing here is a battle, actually 1 second in the battle, like the cannons are just starting to be fired and the smoke is just starting to come out of them. And the North Carolina cavalry coming down on these troops was actually annihilated when this happened.
This mural is named Duality. It was painted by an artist by the name of Marty Tubles, who is an elder of the Sioux Nation in South Dakota, and he actually lives in New Mexico. And he came here and painted this for us. And his purpose here was to demonstrate, in the far back left, you'll see that both the Native Americans and the European settlers coexisted quite peacefully together. And that was the history of the natives and the Europeans all over this country. They all started out peacefully coexisting. And then the value of money and the interest of land and all that sort of stuff began to cause people to be more interested in ownership. And to the natives, it was kind of confusing that the Europeans would offer them things to own the land, because in their culture, there was no way, nobody could own the land. But, you know, okay, if you want to give me something for land you can't own, I'll take it. And then as soon as the white people thought they owned the land, they started putting up fences and driving the natives off, and then they began to understand what they hadn't previously understood, and that led to the whole change of the culture. But it is there to demonstrate that the conflict, like almost all other conflicts, is usually driven by greed and money. Wadena is such a classic, all-American, real downtown. If you walk up and down our main street, you don't find lots of boarded up buildings, modern boutiques, a cluster of modern antique shops. You find real businesses that have been here for dozens and dozens of years. One of our favorite features is the Art Deco Cozy Theater that this is the rear wall of. So it was an appropriate place for a local artist, D. Scogan, to paint a mural of Minnesota movie stars. Of course, we had to have some fun in the course of doing this whole thing. One of the fun things we did was over here on the uptown, they needed to insulate the second floor. And so when they decided to do that, we decided that we would put art in all of those windows. And the uptown is our sports bar. And so the owner happens also to be an art instructor. So I got all the materials together and he did all of the art. And there, I believe we have 39 sports heroes listed in those 14 pieces. There are 8 of them on this side and 6 on the other side of the building. I believe this to be the most beautiful outdoor portrait gallery that may exist, that certainly in Minnesota, maybe anywhere in the country. The artist who painted these was asked to portray lesser known leaders of Minnesota. We have Chief Little Crow, who led the 1862 uprising, Charles Eastman, who was the first Native American medical doctor in this country, also one of the founders of the Boy Scouts of America. Martha Ripley, the first woman doctor, who founded a hospital for unwed women and their children. Joe Roulette, who was the renegade politician in the territorial legislature. They actually passed a law to move the capital from St. Paul to St. Peter, and Joe took that legislation and went into hiding and stayed there until it was too late for the governor to sign it into law. Mary Gibbs was the 24-year-old commissioner of Itasca State Park, took over from her father. It prevented the logging companies from flooding the land and harvesting the virgin timber. We got James J. Hill, which most people know, but what they don't know is that James J. Hill came here as an 18-year-old teenager, and within 15 years he had monopolized the transportation and waterfront shipping barge business in St. Paul, and from there went into the railroading business. And then we had Cass Gilbert, who designed the Capitol, James Goodhue, the first publisher, and Jane Grace Swisshelm, who is my hero. Jane ran a newspaper in St. Cloud, and she would write these stories about how the business bureaucrats and the politicians would cheat the people, and they didn't like it very much. So at some point, somebody hired some hoodlums to go in and tear up her press and her newspaper, and she went to the bank to borrow money, and the bank said, yeah, we'll loan you this money, but on one condition, and that is that the St. Cloud Reporter no longer do this and this and this and this and this. So Jane thought for a little bit, and then she said okay, and she signed it, took the money, went home, changed the name of the paper, and kept on doing exactly the same thing. Thank you for taking this abbreviated tour. We've taken you through maybe about a half or a little less of all of the murals here in Wadena. And what I want to share at the conclusion is this is such a beautiful classic town. We have a gorgeous guide that we printed. You can come here to the depot or the Chamber of Commerce or call ahead and line up a tour. We've got a half a dozen people that can take you on a tour. And it's a great fun place, and we've got wonderful shops to visit, very friendly merchants. It's a wonderful all-American downtown Minnesota.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed the show, and we look forward to seeing you next week right here on Common Ground. If you have a segment idea for Common Ground pertaining to North Central Minnesota, contact us at legacy@lptv.org or call us at 218-333-3022. To view this episode or any Common Ground segment, visit us at lptv.org/Common Ground. For individual segments or copies of Common Ground, please call 218-333-3020. Common Ground is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. If you enjoyed this segment of Lakeland Public Television's Common Ground, consider making a contribution at lptv.org.